Our second reading is from Mark 9, 2 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling bright, such as no one on earth could brighten them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. And as they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. And so my sermon today is Light Will Shine Out of Darkness. And I want to take a minute because we're in this unusual time of year here where, or an unusual coinciding of events. And that is Ash Wednesday falls on Valentine's Day. And, I saw a Facebook meme, and it's the one where The Rock is driving, he turns around to the little girl, and so he says, "What are you doing for Valentine's Day?" And she says, "I'm rubbing dirt on people and telling them they're going to die." Not a typical Valentine's Day. I hope you come to have dirt rubbed on your face and for me to be able to tell you you're going to die. On Wednesday, there'll be good food after or before. It'll be a great thing. But I want to think about the ways in which love transforms us. Because Jesus is being transfigured, transformed. His light is shining out. But don't we all have a little foretaste of that? Can you remember the first time you fell in love? Or maybe the biggest love you fell into? Because sometimes the first one you don't want to think about, right? But think about how that falling in love transformed not only you, but all of creation, at least in your own mind. Isn't love amazing? When you fall in love, what else? It's not just you see something in the other person. Don't you see something different in yourself? And as silly as it is, don't you start seeing things in the world that, in the, rush and hardship and darkness and distraction that we overlook? Aren't the days just more glorious? Isn't the moon more beautiful? The flowers smell better, the meals taste better. Love transforms us, and it seems to transform everything. It gives us a taste of what could be so often. Because when we think about getting married, and we know all the bad marriages that we've seen, we know all of the missteps that people make in growing up, but we have this overwhelming hope it's going to be different. Why? Because we love one another. And for most of us, there's this fading out. The love isn't so blinding, you can't see anything else but love. After a while, our bad behaviors start creeping in. We start dealing with sometimes the reality of the person. instead of the image of the person. But I think that there's something more right in that ecstatic, overwhelming, blinding love than the day-to-day, 5 years later, 10 years later, whenever, when the honeymoon fades out, because the honeymoon fades. But that vision of transformation, that transfiguration, was not false. The moon really is that beautiful. And the flowers really do smell that amazing. It's just in our day-to-day lives we stop taking time to look at the creation that God has given us and look at it through the eyes of love and the eyes of hope, the eyes of that transfiguration. We can reconnect with that at any moment if we just would. And we need to. That light needs to shine out of the darkness. And it will shine out of the darkness. God is with us through all of our trials and tribulations. And those trials and tribulations can break us. And the reality is that, at some point we are all going to die. But what do we do with that beautiful, magical, amazing life that we have been given? Because sometimes when we stop and sit with our mortality, we remember in that moment, I've still got time left. And what am I going to do with that time? God transfigured the earthly body of Jesus. And these few disciples saw that transfiguration. When Moses faced God on the mountaintop, when he came down, he had to wear a veil because he was glowing so much. People were afraid that being touched by God would kill them if they looked upon it. Because sometimes, when you're caught in that light of love, it really is powerful. It's tangible. Because when you fell in love, didn't everybody else know it, even if you're trying to keep it a secret? Why? Why did they know? We go back to look at those 50 songs. There's a new wiggle in your walk. There's something different in your talk when love has got you. So the question is, how will we be transformed by this light? Because here's the thing, when we look at this passage, Peter's up there and he's caught in this vision of Jesus radiating from this transfiguration. And now all of a sudden you've got Moses there and you've got Elijah there, and this is just so good that Peter says, can't we just stay here? Can't we just stay here on this mountain in this perfect moment? Now, isn't that how we feel when we fall in love? I don't want anything to change. I want it to be just like this forever. But that's separating us from the reality of the world that we live within. We can't freeze moments. Because when we stop moving and stop growing, we start dying. But at any moment, we can reinvigorate through prayer, through fellowship. We come together and share a meal together. There are so many ways to reconnect with those peak moments. And that's part of what we're called to do. And then we're called to live into it. Because as soon as Peter says, hey, let's just freeze this moment, a shadow passes over this perfect moment. And God's like, that's not what I'm intending. I'm not intending you to have that moment of ecstasy and just stay there. Because there's also work to be done. But we remember it. And then we embody it. Because love is just not that moment of beautiful ecstasy that transforms us and seems to transform the world. The world was the world before you fell in love. Because there's somebody else that's just fallen in love 5 minutes before that are just recognizing it. And somebody 10 years before that and 20, all the way back, right? Something's changed in you. How do you live that day to day? And how do you reconnect with that in those hard moments that are to come? When we look at the marriage vows, it's not all the beauty and the glory and that ecstasy. It's in sickness and in health, in good times and hard times, in living and in dying. So maybe it's not so odd that Valentine's Day and Ash Wednesday are falling together, because that's our wedding vows, the good and the bad, and it's worth it. Now, what do we do to live it? Because if you don't live it, the hard times get harder. We can't stay in the moment. But through that transfiguring moment, we do the work that needs to be done. And the mountain is still there. And we can look back on it and say, I remember that moment up there. I remember how powerful it was and how it changed me. And I can keep going back to it. Even if I don't physically go back up there, I can still follow the path laid before me, full of love and hope, full of opportunity. Light will shine out of the darkness. We have an opportunity to be that light as individuals, because, as our little ones say, sometimes just a word of compassion makes the difference in someone else's life. Sometimes a hug in that moment of despair helps people hold on to themselves. It doesn't take much. Drop by drop, the personal actions we do matter. And as a community, there is so much that we can do, and so much hope that we can give to ourselves and to the people in our communities. Because it is hard right now. We know about some of the grief that is unfolding in our community right now. And there are so many other things that we don't have any idea about. Sometimes we don't know how much someone just needs that hug, or that kind word, or that can of food. But we're able to be that light in a world that is so often dark. I pray that that is what leads us and guides us forward. I think that we all know people that are in love with the idea of being in love, because that moment is so intense. The love deepens and it grows and it struggles and it continues if we're able to touch that transfiguring moment. And God provides those touchstones. The mountaintop is one of them. For Luke, it was the valley, being with the people in their struggles. For some people, it's the church. Some folks, it's the fellowship hall. I pray that we're able to live into that call to love, to care, to shine that light as individuals and as a community, because our people need that. May it be so.